So yesterday, we were discussing a machlokas between Rebbe Yehuda and Rebbe Nassan as to whether there are four mishmaros at night or two mishmaros at night. Three mishmaros at night. And the Gemara had said, well, there's a pasuk that says that King David woke up two mishmaros, leaving over two mishmaros. He woke up in the middle of the night when there were ashmuros left. So doesn't that imply that if he woke up at midnight, he had slept through two mishmaros, and there were two mishmaros left? That would imply there are four mishmaros, not like Rebbe, who says there are only three. So our Gemara had answered that question by saying it depended on whether whether King David was having an affairs of state dinner the night before. If he was having an affairs of state dinner the night before, he would wake up at midnight. That was considered to be sleeping in. But if he was just having an early dinner with his family, he would sleep until only through the first mishmar, from let's say 6 to 10. And then he would wake up at 10 p.m. And therefore he would have two mishmaros left, even if you say there are three mishmaros. Okay? That's how the Yerushalmi answers the question. I noticed in the footnote that the Bavli has two different answers to this question. The Bavli asks the same question: how can you say if there are only three mishmaros that King David woke up at Ashmuros, leaving over two mishmaros? So the Bavli gives two answers. One is that there were two mishmaros, or 8 hours, before he woke up at midnight, but there were still 8 hours left that normal kings sleep in. That's what
extending the time of waking.
We said that kings wake up later, 3 hours into the morning. So starting with the third hour, which would be between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. using our clocks, that's when normal kings would wake up. So when it says in the pasuk that I wake up the Ashmuros, I'm up before the Ashmuros. It's 2 4-hour periods, or 8 hours before normal kings wake up, but not before the dawn. Okay, that would be one way of answering it. Another way of answering the question would be, even if there are three mishmaros and King David woke up in the middle of the second, how many mishmaros are left over? One and a half. One and a half mishmaros. So you could argue that the word ashmurot in the plural could mean one and a half. So those are the two ways that the Bavli answers it. But I like the Yerushalmi's creativity better. That there were two times he would fluctuate depending upon the politics of the day.
So we never play that game with plural being one and a half. Plural is always two. Right? When we say what is it?
Usually, yeah. So perhaps in this case, and when King David was singing about his dedication to Hashem, maybe one and a half is good enough to be two. And then we saw yesterday that King David, there's a machlokas as to whether he would wake up on his own and then start playing the harp and the lyre at midnight, or whether he would be awakened by the wind blowing through the strings of his stringed instruments, and that would wake him up. So two different approaches. And I noticed also that the commentaries discuss the issue. Weren't we suggesting that King David was waking up to learn Torah? So was he waking up to learn Torah, or was he waking up to play music?
Yeah, you do both.
Yeah, doesn't music inspire you to pray, to learn?
Okay, so one option is that music wakes you. Music is the introduction sometimes you need to get you in the mood to study Torah, right?
Which is very powerful.
Right, just like when, there's this concept in the Gemara that when a person opens up a shir, he's supposed to try to start off with milsa de bidichusa, which means words that are somewhat jocular. You're supposed to open up a shir by disarming everyone and making everyone feel at ease.
Awesome. That's the tactic. Sorry, Rabbi, you're giving away
Yeah.
rabbinical
I
secrets.
think, Paul, you are machmir on that halacha. You try. You start, yeah, and then it continues throughout this year. Yeah.
It only makes sense to me as a, or is it for your sake, for even for
But it's for his own, if it's for his own,
Yeah, you
his
like
own,
yourself.
his own mindset, you know? And by the way, we have that concept of fix your mindset properly before you engage in a mitzvah. That's why when we daven Shmona Esrei, we have to precede it with Psukei de Zimra
Yeah.
and the blessings of
How'd
the
you do that?
Shema, right? The Gemara itself says that.
Songs of praise.
In Brachos, we'll probably confront it in the Yerushalmi too.
Mhm.
The reason why we have to recite the Shema and its blessings right before the Amida is to accept our faith upon ourselves, the yoke of heaven, and then recall that God took us out of Egypt, and that puts us in the right frame of mind in order to praise and thank Hashem and ask Him for our daily needs. In the similar vein, you could argue that the playing of musical instruments was the way of prepping King David to be able to get up in the middle of the night and steig away at his learning from a state in a state of he's in a good headspace. It's not like it could be freezing cold in Yerushalayim and no one else is up and the house is cold, but he's so happy because he's heard his music and now he's ready to start the new day. Now, another possibility is that the music is the Torah, because what was King David doing?
Yeah.
He was composing Tehillim, and Tehillim is Torah. It's devotional Torah, right? It's devotional. It's part of Tanakh. So he's speaking with divine inspiration, composing the exquisite words of Tehillim, but that too is Torah. So if a person were to wake up and do Tikkun Chatzos, and he wanted to fulfill the mitzvah of Torah, you can recite Tehillim. But remember, reciting Tehillim, there are different ways to recite Tehillim. If you just daven Tehillim, there's virtue in that, but it's more incantational than anything else. When you recite Tehillim and understand the words, it's a whole new dimension. That's actually Torah study. I'm not so sure that incanting Tehillim without understanding what you're saying is considered Torah study. There might be people who hold that it is. The mystics actually say that even reading psukim without understanding what you're saying has a profound esoteric effect on your neshama, right? And so therefore you do fulfill some aspect of Talmud Torah, but that seems to be more of a radical, I'm not sure if it would call, maybe not radical, but it's definitely supra-rational. It's not from the rational school. The rational school of thought, like a Maimonidean would say, how can you fulfill Torah study if you're just saying words that have no meaning to you? So you're certainly always better if you want to fulfill the mitzvah of Talmud Torah to know what you're saying. Okay, so now we're ready. Where are we? We're on Zion Amid Aleph, and so Ma Mekayem Rebbe Taima de Rebbe Nasa. What is Rebbe, who holds that there are 3 mishmaros? What is he going to do with Rebbe Nasan's pasuk, which seems to say, I'm sorry, is Rebbe. Oh, so what is Rebbe Nasan going to do? We saw a pasuk that says that there is a middle mishmar, Rosh HaAshmora Satichona. We saw a pasuk from Shoftim that says that there was a middle mishmar. That seems to prove that there are only 3 mishmaros and not 4, because if there are an even number of mishmaros, you can't have a middle mishmar. So Amar Rabbi Huna, Sofa shel shnia virosha shel shlishis. He says, when the pasuk says the beginning of the middle mishmar, it means the end of the second mishmar. Really, there are 4 mishmars, Rabbi Nassan will tell you, and it's really referring to the end of the second mishmar and the beginning of the third mishmar. That's what it means, the middle mishmar, meaning that essentially when you hit midnight, you're considered to be in the middle mishmar. Really, it's the middle of the mishmars, is really, that's how Rebbe Nassan understands. Hein miskavnos es halayla, meaning that really is the middle of the night. And that's really all the pasuk means when it says the middle mishmar. It means the middle of the mishmaros. Now, Amar Rebbe Mana, v'ya'us, Rebbe Mana says, is this really correct? Miksiv tichonos, lo tichona. It doesn't say in the middles, meaning that would imply that it's in between the two middle mishmars. It says tichona. It says that it's the middle mishmar. It doesn't say the middle of the mishmaros like we're trying to interpret it. So how can you say that it's in between the two middle mishmars? That's not a correct way of reading the pasuk, and therefore he has a different way of explaining the way how you explain it. Kadmaisa lo mischashva. The first mishmar is not counted even though there are 4 mishmaros, the first one is not considered to be one of the mishmaros. Da'ad kedon biriyasa erin, because until the end of the first mishmar, people are still awake. And therefore, like in other words, if there are 4 mishmars, each mishmar is 3 hours. So let's say the first mishmar ends, it's at 9 p.m. People are still awake between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. And when the pasuk is talking about Yiftach going in the middle of the night, it wants to observe that he went in the middle of the night when people would normally be sleeping, during the hours when people would normally be sleeping. And so therefore, what he means to say is at the beginning of the middle mishmar of the last 3 mishmaros, that's when he got up and did what he needed to do. So the bottom line is that there's a way of interpreting the psukim that Rebbe Nassan brings for his position that there are 4 mishmars, and Rebbe can interpret those. And there's a way to interpret the psukim that Rebbe brings that there are only 3 mishmars that Rebbe Nassan can live with also. So that's really the exercise that the Gemara is going back and forth and trying to explain. Now we go on, and we're ready to start a new topic. And the new topic starts with the word piska. Now that word piska is not a word that we're used to finding in the Bavli. And if you take a look at footnote number 11, he writes, Bekama mekomos b'Yerushalmi, makdimim es hamila piska litzitut min hamishna. Sometimes when we're bringing a quote, a snippet from the Mishnah, the word that introduces this quote from the Mishnah is piska. Now that's not normally the way the Bavli speaks. When the Bavli wants to bring a quote from the Mishnah, usually what words will precede it? Tanya, or Tanan, or Tashma. Come and listen. Okay? Hagemara mishtameshet b'mila zu kidei lahudia shehi overet levaer keta chadash mehamishna. The word piska in the Yerushalmi is used to say we're now going to take a new piece of the Mishnah that we've already studied, and we're going to analyze it. Uchemo Amar Mar bebavli, and sometimes you have the words Amar Mar that appear in the Bavli as well. Kishahagemara overet levaer keta acher shel habraisa hashenuya lifnei. When we're coming to quote either from a Mishnah or a Braisa that we cited before, and now we're going to analyze it more carefully. So you have Tanan if it's citing the Mishnah, Tanya if it's citing a Braisa. We have sometimes Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, which is also a citation of a Braisa, but that's usually introducing a new Braisa. We have Tashma, which is come and listen to something that we've already cited that may challenge something that we've already said. Or we have Omar Mar, we have the master taught, which is something that we've already learned, but we haven't really broken it apart yet. So that's what the word piska
So it
means.
can be a Mishnah or a place.
It's usually referring to something that we've already studied. Now we've already studied the Mishnah, right? So now we're going to go back to a new quote from that Mishnah and analyze it now.
What does the word actually mean?
Yeah, probably it comes from the word pasuk, which means a sentence. Let's cite a sentence from the Mishnah, from the previously studied Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan poseg. Oh, sorry, I'm reading from the Yerushalmi. The Chachamim Omrim ad chatzos. So we had seen a three-way machlokes as to until when do you have to recite Kriya Shema. Up until now, we were discussing the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that you have until the end of the first Mishmar, which is, according to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who holds there are three Mishmaros, which seems to be the prevailing opinion, is that you have from 6 until 10 p.m. After 10 p.m., it's too late to recite Kriya Shema. Second opinion is that of the Chachamim, that you have until Chatzos Halayla, you have until midnight. The opinion number 3 is that of Rabbi Gamliel, that you only have, that you have even longer, you have until dawn. Now the Bavli, in analyzing the 3 opinions, really says that there are only 2 opinions. There's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that you have until the end of the first Mishmar, and you have the opinion of Rebbe and Rabbi Gamliel that technically, or b'di'eved, you have until dawn, but lechatchila, you should strive to always finish before midnight, lest, or like a rabbinic institution, say it before midnight, lest you come to get busy or fall asleep, and you'll neglect to meet the deadline of dawn. But it's not clear from the Yerushalmi, at least we haven't seen anything yet, that they also collapse the 2 opinions into one opinion. Let's see. Okay. So Rabbi Yasa b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, halacha kachachamim. Rabbi Yasa, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, says, we paskin like the chachamim, that you have until chatzos halayla. And Rabbi Yasa mefaked lechavraya. He gave the following charge to the chevra, to the group of scholars that was in the Beis Medrash. Ein be'esun misaska be'oraisa. He says, if you want to study Torah at night, atun karya shema kodem chatzos umisaskin. Then it's necessary to recite Kriya Shema first, in the evening, and then study Torah. And we're going to learn some halachas from this, but it's clear that he's concerned that you may get so engrossed in your Torah study that you're going to miss the deadline of Chatzos, and therefore recite Kriya Shema first.
Those rabbis, they brought over that morning.
Yeah, in the Haggadah. Yeah, they got so engrossed in the Haggadah that they lost track of the time. There you go. So Milsei Amra. So we can infer from the words of Rabbi Yasa, Shahalacha kachachamim, that number 1, we paskin like the chachamim, that you only have until chatzos. And the second halacha is Milsei Amra, Sha'omer Devarim la'achar emes v'yatziv, that you can learn from his words that you're allowed to speak after you say emes v'yatziv. Now, what is emes v'yatziv? Where do we say that?
Right after Shema.
Right after Shema in the Shacharis service. We're not talking about the Shacharis service now, so there seems to be some confusion as far as what in the heck are we talking about. So the answer is that the minhag, when this Yerushalmi is being written, is that the text of emes v'yatziv is said both in the morning and in the evening. Later on, the minhag changed. What's the history of that? And perhaps was it always different in Bavel, and it was only emes v'yatziv both times in Eretz Yisrael? unclear. By the way, there is a big difference between emes v'yatziv and emes ve'emuna. What are the literal words? What are the literal meaning of the words emes v'yatziv? Emes we know is truth. What does v'yatziv mean?
Fixed.
Fixed or standing, like really firmly ensconced. What does emes ve'emuna mean? Faith. So what's the difference between emes v'yatziv, truth that is firmly ensconced, and truth that is based on faith? One, you have absolute clarity, emes v'yatziv. The other, emes ve'emuna. I believe it. Can I see that it's crystal clear? No, that's why I call it faith. There's a difference between knowledge and faith. Why is there a difference between day and night? Because in the daytime, you can see things clearly. At night, it's dark. The Jew has faith that even in the darkness, Hashem is there, and that there's a system. And that's why so much of the Ma'ariv service changes in subtle ways between the evening and the morning. The evening is a metaphor for belief in God amidst the darkness, and the morning prayer is a metaphor for belief in God amidst clarity, where you feel that God is present. So that's just one example, emes v'yatziv versus emes ve'emuna. We also, in Nusach Ashkenaz, we say ahava rabbah in the morning, and we say ahavat olam in the evening, as the two paragraphs that immediately precede the Shema. It's the same concept. Ahava rabbah means an intense love. Ahavat olam is an eternal love. What's the difference? Well, ahava rabbah is when you first meet the girl and you're totally smitten. Ahavat olam is when you're married for 40 years and you're not like gaga over her, but you still like the relationship is extremely deep and profound, but also not as passionate maybe as it used to. What?
Dark.
Well, the difference is
Don't worry about that.
well,
Big is a marriage.
well, you definitely want to turn off the lights at some point. Right? So anyway, the difference is the daytime represents those times of redemption and miracles, and that's ahava rabbah. That's the intense love. Hashem, you're here for us. You won the war for us, and everything is great. We're gaga over you. Okay. Emes ve'emuna is amidst the darkness. Our love is everlasting. There may be medical issues we have to take care of. There may be problems in our lives, but as long as we have each other, we can see it through. Right? That's the difference between ahava rabbah versus ahavat olam. Now, what's interesting is that Nusach Sfard says ahavat olam for both the morning and the evening. So go figure. But you see, Nusach Sfard is a good exemplar for what we're discussing here. Emes v'yatziv, we change. We go from emes v'yatziv in the morning to emes ve'emuna in the evening. But don't be so shocked, because just like in Nusach Sfard, they say avas olam both for Shacharis and for Ma'ariv, they used to say in the Yerushalmi period in Eretz Yisrael, emes v'yatziv both in the morning and in the night, right after Kriya Shema. Okay, so with that in mind, what is the Gemara saying? The second thing we learned from Rebbe Yassi's words, he said, first recite Kriya Shema and then learn Torah. Now, what we're inferring from here is that you're allowed to speak after you say the blessings after the Shema. Now, what in the world is the Gemara talking about? Apparently, there was a practice that is no longer extant, but it's extant to a limited degree, that you said Kriya Shema and then you went to bed. And there wasn't supposed to be any hefsek, any interruption between Kriya Shema al Hamita and going to bed. But from Rabbi Yassi's point of view, you could say the Ma'ariv Kriya Shema, it's dark, it's night. Your Yotze, your obligation for Kriya Shema for the rest of the night. And then you could say the blessing after Kriya Shema. And then you could go about your Torah study business for the next few hours. And you don't have to create an adjacency between your Kriya Shema and going to bed. Now, we do both things. We say Kriya Shema in Ma'ariv, and then we say Kriya Shema a second time before we go to bed. That's Kriya Shema Lamita. That's but Kriya Shema Lamita is to create that adjacency that before I surrender my body and my consciousness to God, I'm willing to affirm my faith. But it's not a formal davening like Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv. So it doesn't have the same prominence. But at least we understand now what the Gemara is talking about. Rabbi Yassi felt that for the Ma'ariv Shema, it doesn't have to be adjacent to going to sleep. So like the commentary says, Midivrei Rabbi Yassa, yesh limod shemuter lahafsik achrei brachos elu b'dvarim acherim lifnei hashena. You'll say the blessings after Kriya Shema, and then you're allowed to engage in other activity. The Ein Tzarach Likros Kriya Shema Shel Arvis Dafka Samach L'Shena Below Hefsek. You're not obligated to recite the Kriya Shema of the evening, mamish right before you go to bed. Shaharei Omer Rebbe Yassa L'Chachamim Sheyasku B'Torah Lacher Kriya Shema, because he told the Chachamim that they should engage in Kriya Shema. They should first engage in Kriya Shema and then engage in Torah study. Okay, so I also wanted us to, I don't think we've had a chance to look at the Psak Halacha. I'm just trying to see, where did I see that? Is it footnote 12? Yeah. We paskin that lechatchila you should strive to recite Kriya Shema before chatzos, but you have technically until dawn to recite Kriya Shema. And it's exactly the way I said. We're worried that you may forget if we let you go past chatzos. So the Rabbanan instituted a takana like the Chachamim that you should strive always to say before chatzos. But in the event that you forget, let's say sometimes it's possible, like on a long summer day, you fall asleep at 8 p.m. It's too early to be Yotzei Kriya Shema. And then you wake up at 2 a.m. It's already past chatzos. You can still recite Kriya Shema. You get out of bed, relieve yourself, wash your hands, do Netilas Yadayim, and then recite Kriya Shema then. And you're perfect, and Daven Ma'ariv then as well. And you're perfectly Yotzei.
Between what the Kara and beds where it's clearly halacha that we can't do certain things.
Well, a takana and a fence are the same thing, because that's what really a takana is, to create a fence around the biblical law. But there are some fences that are inviolate, which is like, it's not just lechatchila, don't eat chicken and milk, but b'di'evet, if they got mixed in, that's okay. That we don't say.
Right.
And there are other rabbinic fences where it's only lechatchila, only best case,
Right.
but in a worst case, then you're okay. So you have to, there's no fast and steady rule for that. You just have to look at when the Chachamim instituted the inviolable ones and the ones that are lechatchila versus b'di'evet.
When they were at a time that Takana was instituted, they would clarify whether it was volatile or not.
Yes, but this is a perfect example of where the Mishnah is subject to interpretation. The Yerushalmi does not seem to agree with the Bavli that the Chachamim and Rabbi Gamliel agree with each other. They view it as two different opinions. But we paskin that lechatchila we paskin like the Chachamim, and b'di'evet we paskin like Rabbi Gamliel, and they're not really disagreeing. Okay. All right, so we'll hold it. Let's see. Oh wait, we have one more minute. So let's see. So the Gemara is now going to bring a brisa that have to do with this question. Are you allowed to interrupt between Kriya Shema and sleep? So Tani, HaKoriya Shema Beveis HaKnesses B'Shachar, Yatsa Yedei Chovasa. That if you recite Kriya Shema in the morning, you have fulfilled your obligation, but Ba'erev Lo Yatsa Yedei Chovasa. But if you recite it in the evening, you have not fulfilled your obligation. And the reason is because communities used to daven Ma'ariv early, like so many of us do today. And the Kriya Shema that you recited in the shul is recited too early in order for you to be Yotzei. The Bryce is going to elaborate on this point, but we'll have to leave that for next time. Unfortunately, I have a medical issue that I have to deal with tomorrow morning. So I'm hoping, if everything goes well, that we'll continue on Monday, but I'll be off tomorrow. Okay, I apologize for the absence. Okay, have a great day, everybody.